Draw it, the man in front of the tribunal said. Here now, in front of all of us. If you are what you claim to be, that should take you no time at all. 400 people, and every one of them watching my hands. I want you to understand that he had not accused me of a crime I could deny. He had accused me of a talent, and the whole of my defence. The only thing standing between the King of Marrowgate and a charge that would end him was whether a market girl with a charcoal stub could do the thing she had spent her whole life being told was worthless. If my hand shook, he won. Behind me, a man I had spent 11 weeks entirely failing to understand said my name once, very quietly, in a voice I had never heard him use in public. I picked up the charcoal. 11 weeks earlier, I had drawn that same man with a little crown and a grumpy face, and sold 40 copies of it for a penny each. My name is seen, and I draw. Not properly. I want to be clear about that from the start, because it matters enormously later and because I said it about myself for 26 years. I have never had a lesson. I cannot do the thing the guild painters do with light. I draw faces, quickly, in charcoal, for money, at a stall in the Marrowgate market between the fish and a woman selling terrible cheese. A penny for a likeness, 2 for a flattering one. 3 if you want your late husband from memory, which happens more than you would think, and which I have never once charged extra for. Whatever the sign says. I was 26 that spring. No house, no rank, no prospects worth the word. My mother sold fish at that same stall for 30 years and could not draw a straight line, and thought my hands were a party trick, and loved me anyway. The wanted poster was a joke. That is the whole of the origin. There is no more to it than that. It was a wet Tuesday. Nobody was buying likenesses, and the market had spent the whole morning talking about the king the way markets do. ALPHA King Wulfric of Marrowgate, the terror of the Northern Line, 9 years on the throne. A man about whom every single story ended with somebody being torn in half. The fishwoman said he'd killed his own brother. The cheesewoman said he ate raw meat at the table. A carter swore his cousin had seen the king's wolf take a man's arm off for looking at him wrong. And I had seen him. Once, 6 weeks before, riding through the market at the head of a column, while everyone flattened themselves back against the stalls to be as small as possible. So while everyone else was terrifying each other, I was drawing what I had actually seen. Because what I had seen was not a monster. What I had seen was an enormous, thunderously grumpy man on a horse who looked like he had a headache and would rather be anywhere else, and who had. This is the detail that made me put charcoal to board, pulled his horse up sharply, and gone around a child's dropped ball rather than over it, and then looked furious about having done it. I drew that. A big, scowling wolf-eared man on a horse. A little crown, slightly too small, sitting crooked. A tremendous frown. And underneath, in my best market sign lettering, wanted. Very large man. Extremely grumpy. Answers to your grace. Reward. None. He is already king. The fishwoman laughed until she had to sit down. A carter gave me a penny for it. Then another one did. I sold 40 copies in 9 days. 40, at a penny each, which was more than I made in likenesses that entire month, and I had a stack of the things weighted under a stone on the corner of my stall on the 10th morning when a shadow fell over the table and did not move. I did not look up immediately. Nobody looks up immediately. You finish your line. How much? Penny each, love, 2 for A. I looked up. I want to tell you that I did something clever. I did not do anything at all. Every part of me simply stopped, the way a rabbit stops, because the man standing at my stall, in a plain dark coat with no colours on him anywhere, was the man on the poster. And he was holding one of my posters, and he was reading it. He read it for a long time. I have since worked out it was about 9 seconds. It was the longest 9 seconds of my life. The market went on around us, entirely oblivious, the fishwoman haggling 3 feet away with no idea whatsoever, and I sat there and watched the King of Marrowgate read a joke I had made about him at his own expense, 40 copies of which were currently pinned up in taverns across his own city. "The crown's too small," he said. "Yes, Your Grace. It's meant to be too small. Yes, Your Grace." He turned the poster around. Not accusingly. He turned it the way a man turns a thing he is genuinely examining, and looked at it. And then looked at me, and said, "Where do you live?" I have been asked, since, what I felt at that moment, and the honest answer is that I felt exactly the way you feel when you have been asked a question with 2 entirely opposite meanings and no way whatsoever to tell which one is in play. Because that is a thing you ask a woman you intend to have collected in the night, and it is also apparently a thing you ask a woman when you have absolutely no idea how to say anything else. I told him. God knows why. He put a coin on the table, gold, an actual gold piece, for a penny poster, which I want you to understand is roughly 6 months of my income, and took the drawing and walked off into the market. And I sat at my stall for a full quarter hour without moving while the fishwoman asked me repeatedly whether I was quite well. I did not sleep that night. Or the next one. I sat in my room above the tanner's and worked through, in order, every single thing that happens to a market girl who mocks an alpha king in public, and I want to be honest with you. I packed a bag. Nobody came. What came instead, on the 4th morning, was a boy from the keep with a note that said, in an appalling hand, "The horse's legs are wrong," and nothing else. I read it 11 times. The horse's legs were, in fact, wrong. I had drawn them from memory, and I had got the back ones badly, and I had known it, and had not fixed it, because it was a joke poster, and nobody looks at the horse. He had looked at the horse. I want to describe what that did to me, because it is the hinge of this entire story, and it has nothing to do with romance. I had drawn for money for 11 years. In 11 years, not one person had ever criticised my work. Because nobody critiques a market drawing any more than they critique a bowl of soup. They pay their penny, they take their likeness, they go. My mother thought it was a party trick. The guild would not have let me through the door. And an appalling note from a man who could barely write had just told me my horse legs were wrong, and it was the first time in my life anybody had looked at my work like it was work. I drew a new one. Correct legs. Same grumpy face, same crooked crown, and I gave it to the boy and told him to take it back. And I want it on record that I did not intend this to become a correspondence. It became a correspondence. 9 weeks of it. Notes in that dreadful hand. The ears are better. My second does not look like that. He is uglier. Why is the hand smaller than the other hand? And me, drawing and fixing, and sending them back, and slowly, without at any point deciding to, spending every evening of my life on the floor of my room, above a tannery, working on drawings for a man who had never once said anything to me that was not about the drawings. I did not know if I was in trouble. I want you to sit with that, because I sat with it for 9 weeks. I genuinely did not know. There is no version of that arrangement where a woman in my position can be certain. A king who buys your mockery for gold and then corresponds with you about it might be charmed, or might be assembling something, and the fact that I could not tell was itself a kind of weather I lived in every single day. I asked him, in the end. Directly, in week 6, in a note, because I am my mother's daughter, and she once asked a magistrate to his face whether he intended to pay for his fish. "Your Grace, am I in trouble?" The reply came back the same day. 4 words, in that terrible hand, "No." I am, possibly. I read that on the tanner's stairs and had to sit down on them. He came to the market himself in the 8th week, in the plain coat, alone, which I had by then worked out was not a disguise. Nobody in that market was expecting the king to be standing at a stall haggling over charcoal, so nobody saw him. Because people do not see what cannot be there. He wanted a likeness. He said this as though it were an ordinary transaction. He sat down on my customer's stool, which was too small for him by a margin I will remember on my deathbed, and put a penny on the table and said, properly, not the joke one. So I drew the ALPHA King of Marrowgate at a fish market for a penny, while my hands shook. I want to tell you about that hour, because it was the first time we ever really talked, and because everything after it turns on what I noticed. He could not hold still. Nobody can. But he was catastrophic. 9 years of a man who has never once in his adult life been asked to simply sit and be looked at. I told him so. He said, with enormous dignity, that he was holding perfectly still, while visibly not doing so, and I said he had moved his jaw 4 times in as many minutes. And he said, how would you know? And I said, because it is my job to know, Your Grace, and he went quiet and stopped moving after that. And I looked at him for an hour, which nobody does. I have drawn 600 faces. You cannot draw a face without learning it. I learned that he flinched, very slightly, once, when a cart banged behind him. I learned that his right hand sat on the table wrong, held, the way people hold a hand that has been badly broken and badly set. I learned that he watched the market the entire time. Not nervously, but constantly in a pattern, the way a man watches who has been taught to. And I learnt that when I asked him to look at me directly for the eyeline, he could not do it for more than a few seconds without something in his face closing like a door. You've never had this done, I said. No, 9 years a king. There isn't a portrait. There are 4. I sat for none of them. He said it flatly. They're painted from descriptions. That's the usual way, for a man like me. What's a man like you? Wulfric looked at the market for a while. One they're frightened of, he said. You don't put a frightening man in a room with a painter for 6 weeks. You tell the painter what to paint and he paints it, and it comes out the way the council wants it to look, and it hangs in the hall and everyone agrees it is an excellent likeness. He turned back to me. You are the first person in 9 years to make an image of me by looking at me. You did it for a joke, on a wet Tuesday, from 6 weeks' memory, and it is more accurate than every one of them. I did not know, that afternoon, what I had actually made. I did not know that 40 penny posters, sold to carters and pinned up in taverns, had already begun quietly dismantling the most carefully constructed thing in the Northern Territories. If you want to find out what happens when a market girl draws the true face of a man whose whole power depends on the false one, and whether a woman with no house and no name can hold her nerve when 400 people are watching her hands, stay with me. What I did with a charcoal stub in that hall is the reason I am telling you any of this. Lord Bram was the first person to explain to me what I had done, and he did it kindly. Which I have since learned is how the worst things in this story tend to arrive. He was master of the household, the man who ran the keep's face, its ceremonies, its portraits, its entire public shape, and had done for 19 years. He found me at my stall in the 9th week and bought a poster, and laughed at it and complimented my line, and then sat down on the customer's stool and became serious. You need to stop selling these, he said. Not because they offend him, he's plainly delighted, which is its own catastrophe. Because they work. He tapped the crooked crown. Do you know what 9 years of terror bought this territory? Peace. Nobody has raided the northern line since the year he took the throne, and not one man has tested him, And the reason for both of those things is that every alpha in the north believes King Wulfric of Marrowgate is a monster who tore his own brother apart. He looked at me, and now there are 400 copies of a drawing in every tavern from here to the river, showing a grumpy man with a headache going round a child's ball. 400? You sold 40. People copy them, my dear. They've been copying them for 2 months. Lord Bram let that sit. You have made the most feared man in the north likeable. I do not think you understand what you have taken from him. I did not sleep that night either. Because he was right. And I could see he was right. And I had done it by accident with a penny joke. And I sat on the tanner's stairs and understood that the single most successful thing I had ever made in my life might also be the thing that got a great many people killed on the Northern Line. I went to the keep. I had never been inside it. I made them announce me, which took 2 hours and a great deal of humiliation, and when I finally got in front of him, I put it to him straight. Lord Bram says my posters are unmaking you, I said. He says the peace holds because the North is frightened of you, and I've spent 2 months making you into a man with a headache, and if the line breaks it will be because a fish market girl drew a crooked crown. Wulfric was quiet for a long moment. Sit down, he said. Your Grace, seen, sit down. He waited until I did. I did not tear my brother apart. I said nothing. He died at Anmar Ford, in the year I took the throne, holding the crossing with 60 men against 400, so the rest of us could get the column across. It took the most of a day. His right hand, the badly set one, was flat on the table. I was 11 miles away. By the time I reached the ford, it was finished, and I came onto that field and there was nothing left to do but count. And I did that, all night, because somebody has to. And by the following spring the story in every tavern in the north was that Wulfric of Marrowgate had killed his own brother with his hands. Who started it? My own household. He said it without heat. Sensibly, we had lost 60 men, and a prince, and the north was going to test us in the summer. And a king who murders his own blood is a king nobody tests. It was the correct decision. I have never once said otherwise. He stopped. I have been him for 9 years, the man in that story. I have let every person in this territory believe I killed the best man I ever knew. Because it kept the line quiet, and I have never corrected it, in 9 years, not once, to anyone. Something in me went very still and very clear. You bought the poster, I said slowly, because it was the first time anyone had drawn you as a man. I bought the poster, Wulfric said, because I have not been looked at in 9 years. Nobody looks at the thing they are frightened of. They look at where it is. He turned the drawing around on the table. My drawing, the first one, the joke. Kept and carried and clearly handled a great deal. You put a crooked crown on me and made me go round a child's ball, and I recognised myself, and it was the first time in 9 years I have recognised myself in anything. Bram's right, though. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Isn't he? About the line. Yes, then I'll stop. No, Wulfric said. You won't. And I am not going to ask you to. He looked at me. 9 years of a lie kept the north quiet, and it has cost my brother his name, and me every honest thing in my life. And a woman at a fish stall undid it in 9 weeks with a penny joke, and I find I am not willing to be the man who tells her to stop drawing, whatever it costs. I have spent 9 years paying for that piece with the truth, and I am done. Lord Bram moved 11 days later, and he did not move against me. That is the part I did not see coming, and I should have. He did not need to touch a market girl. He went straight for the thing that actually held the North together, and he did it in open council, and he did it. This is what I keep coming back to. because he genuinely believed he was saving the territory. He filed for a competency hearing on the grounds that the king had permitted and privately encouraged the public dismantling of his own deterrent in a season when the Northern Line was already testing the fords. He had it all: the posters, the correspondence, 9 weeks of notes in the king's own dreadful hand, which I had kept, and which he had somehow obtained copies of, gold paid at a market stall for a penny drawing. And he had a charge with teeth, because it was true. The hearing was the worst 4 hours of my life. I sat at the back because a market girl does not sit anywhere else, and I listened to 11 men discuss whether the peace of the North could survive their king being liked, and I watched Wulfric say nothing in his own defence, because the only defence available to him was the truth about Anmar Ford, and the truth about Anmar Ford was the one thing that would have finished the deterrent entirely. He was going to let them take the throne rather than say it. I understood that around the 3rd hour. He had decided, and I could see him having decided, and there was no version of that hearing in which he opened his mouth. So I stood up. My lords, I made the posters. Nobody has asked me anything. Lord Bram was extremely gracious about it. He was gracious the whole way through, which is why it worked. He turned to me with real regret and asked the question he had been building for 11 days, and it was not about the posters at all. Mistress Scene, he said, you have never had a lesson. You cannot read. You have no guild standing, no training, and no master, and you produced, from 6 weeks' memory, on a wet market morning, a likeness of the King of Marrowgate, more accurate than 4 commissioned portraits. He spread his hands, sorrowfully. This council is being asked to believe that. I put it to you plainly. Someone gave you that face. Someone in this keep with access to the king, and a grievance handed a market girl a likeness and a joke and told her where to sell it, and I would very much rather you name him now than hang for him. It was beautiful. I have to say that. He did not accuse me of lying about a crime. He accused me of lying about myself, and every single person in that hall believed him instantly, because every single person in that hall had spent their whole lives knowing exactly what a fish market girl is and is not capable of. I had spent 26 years knowing it too. Draw it, Bram said. Here now, in front of all of us. If you are what you claim to be, that should take you no time at all. 400 people, and every one of them watching my hands. Behind me, Wulfric said my name once, very quietly, and I did not turn around, because if I had turned around I would not have been able to do it. I picked up the charcoal. And then I did the only thing I have ever been good at, which is to look at a person properly and put down what is actually there. I did not draw the king. That is what he expected. That is what the whole hall expected. And it is what I would have got wrong, because my hand was shaking, and a shaking hand cannot do a careful likeness. I drew Lord Bram 19 years of running a keep's face. I had 1 hour of him at my stall and 11 days of him at that table, and I put down what I had seen, the sorrowful set of the mouth that never once reached the eyes, the hands that had been perfectly still for 4 hours while a man he had served for 9 years was dismantled, and the specific, unmistakable, entirely honest satisfaction of a person watching a plan arrive. It took 4 minutes. I turned it around. The hall made a sound I have never heard a room make. That is what I do, my lord, I said. I look at people. I have done it for 11 years for a penny, and nobody has ever thought it was a skill because of who was doing it. You have just told 400 people that a woman like me cannot possibly see clearly. I set the charcoal down. I have just drawn you sitting there enjoying yourself while your king loses his throne. Ask this hall whether it's a good likeness. Nobody had to ask. I want to be fair to Lord Bram, because this story does not work if I am not. He never lied to that council. Everything he filed was true, and his reasons were real. He believed the North would break, and he was not certainly wrong, and he had served that keep for 19 years. But 400 people had just watched him try to convince them that a woman was too low to be capable of the things she was visibly capable of. And they had all been about to believe it, and now they had seen it, and a room does not forgive being shown its own face. He lost the household within the season, not for treason, for being seen, and Wulfric, who had sat through 4 hours of losing his throne rather than say it, stood up in that hall and told them about Anmar Ford. All of it. His brother's name, and the 60 men, and the ford held for most of a day, and 9 years of a lie he had let his own household build because it kept the line quiet. The North did test the fords that summer. I want to be honest about that, because the story is much neater if it doesn't. 2 raids in the first month, both of them probing, both of them because a monster had turned back into a man. Men died. Not many. And none of them because of the posters specifically. And I know that because I made Wulfric tell me the count and he did not spare me any of it. And then it held. It held because Marrowgate met both raids properly, and because the North learned, considerably more slowly than a story travels, that a king who is not a monster can still be an extremely difficult man to fight. It cost 2 years and it cost lives, and Wulfric has never once told me it was worth it, because he will not say a thing he cannot prove. What he says instead is that his brother has his name back. That one he can prove. He came to the stall himself, after the hearing. Not to the workshop, there was no workshop yet, to the stall, between the fish and the terrible cheese, on an ordinary Thursday with the whole market watching, which was the entire point. He sat down on the customer's stool that was too small for him and put a penny on the table. "Your Grace, I can't take your penny in front of. It's the price on the sign." He did not move the penny. I have thought a great deal about how to do this, and every version I came up with involved sending for you, and I have worked out that sending for you is the one thing I must never do. He looked extremely uncomfortable and entirely determined, which I have since learned is that man's natural resting state. You have been unable to tell, for 11 weeks, whether you were in trouble or being courted. I know that. You asked me outright and I gave you 4 words, because I could not think of better ones, and because I am a coward about precisely one thing. His jaw worked, so I am doing it here. At your stall, where you set the price and I am the one sitting on the small stool, because there is no version of me asking you anything in that keep where you are free to say no to me. And I would rather have an honest no from you at a fish market than a frightened yes anywhere else. That's the longest thing you've ever said to me. I've been working on it since the hearing, Wulfric admitted. It was worse. There were 9 more sentences. I kissed him first, on the customer's stool, in front of the fish woman and the cheese woman and about 40 deeply invested strangers. It was brief, and it was warm, and it settled something in me that had been braced since the morning a shadow fell across my table and did not move. The fishwoman charged him for it. She maintains, to this day, that a man who sits at a stall must buy something, and that a kiss is not a likeness and therefore fell outside the posted rates. He paid. He has never once argued with her about anything. Anmar Ford has a stone on it now, with 61 names carved into it, and the first one is the prince's, and the last one is a boy of 15, nobody had recorded anywhere, because he was nobody's son. I did the drawings for the mason. From descriptions, mostly, and from the faces of the families who came, which is its own kind of work and took me most of a year, and which I would not undo for anything. I do not sell penny likenesses anymore, which I resent more than I expected to. I run a workshop in Marrowgate now, 11 apprentices, and I take exactly the students the guild will not. The ones with no house, no lesson, no master, the ones somebody has already told are doing a party trick. The guild has objected 4 times. I have 4 framed copies of their objections, and I have hung them in the entrance hall where the students can see them on the way in. The first lesson I teach is not technique. It is this: look at the person, not at what you have been told about them. That is the whole trade. Everything else is charcoal. He still cannot hold still. 9 years of it, and 2 more since, and the ALPHA King of Marrowgate remains the single worst sitter I have ever had, and I tell him so. Constantly, and he claims, every time, with total conviction, that he is holding perfectly still. And the first poster is framed in the Great Hall. Not the corrected one, the original, with the wrong horse legs and the crooked crown and the terrible market lettering, hanging in the hall where the 4 commissioned portraits used to be. He had them taken down, and that one put up, and when the council objected, he said it was the only accurate image of him in the building, and refused to discuss it further. Wanted, very large man, extremely grumpy. 400 people walk past it a year. Every single one of them stops. I still wonder what would have happened if it had not been raining that Tuesday, or if I had drawn the horse legs right and had nothing to correct. There would have been no notes. I do not like where that thought ends, so I do not finish it. But I wonder about you. Bram was not wrong about the Fords, and men died in that first summer, and he served that keep honestly for 19 years before he tried to end a king to save a border. Was he a villain? Or was he just the only man in that hall willing to say the arithmetic out loud? I have never once landed on an answer. Tell me where you land in the comments. Comment the crown if you want to hear what happened the first time Wulfric's wolf came to the market stall, and 40 people found out at once that the poster was drawn from life. And if you want more nights like this one, a king who was a lie for 9 years to keep a border quiet. A woman who could not draw anything except what was actually there, and one crooked little crown that undid the whole north. Stay close. There is more of Marrowgate left to tell. Where are you listening from tonight? I would love to know.